We're now joined by international news editor Sophie Mokoena for more. Very good afternoon to you, Sophie. Thank you for your time here on the SABC. Perhaps we can start with this exclusive where we just heard from the M23 rebel movement denying attacking the UN peacekeeping helicopter. We understand this is where the SANDF soldier was obviously killed. What else really emerged upon speaking to him?
Well, I think the intention was to find out their activities currently. Because as we speak, the AU is grappling with this matter. You know that the President of South Africa, in his capacity as the chair of the Peace and Security Council of the AU yesterday, did preside over a meeting where this issue was high on the agenda. And therefore, it is almost giving them right to reply. On the margins of the AU, you also have IGAD member states, that is East Africa, who also grappled with this issue yesterday and coming up with a strong statement calling on foreign troops that are in the eastern part of the DRC to pull out, and also calling for cessation of hostilities. And therefore, the interview was important to hear from these rebels where they are in the eastern part of the DRC, what are they up to, and why are they not committed to the talks? Because people are dying. Many people are dying. People are fleeing their homes. You know, the sad thing is that women and children are victims. And therefore, but I started with this issue of the helicopter that was attacked, the UN helicopter, MONUSCO, and the South African team there, the pilot, and of course this engineer who was buried today. What happened? They are denying this, saying that they don't have that kind of capability. You know, it's a sniper, and therefore it's a high caliber weapon and training, and therefore it's not them. And they invited the UN and everybody who's involved, that is SADC, IGAD, to come and investigate. And really, they are prepared to open their camps and everything to prove that they were not involved. Now you have, on the other hand, a report from the UN saying that they were involved. And therefore, from there, it was all about why they don't commit to cessation of hostilities.
Yeah, and it's obviously now brought to the fore a lot of issues that the AU is grappling with in relation to the continent. We have seen the issue of division, debates. There's issues about Africa's position in the global sphere, just given the geopolitics that's unfolding. And one is to question, you know, is there a crisis in relation to African multilateralism, just with trying to maintain peace within regions or lack thereof?
It is a challenge right now. You know that when the AU was restructured a few years ago, President Kagame presided over that process. And therefore, you had changes that were implemented, for example, on the peace and security. And that weakened the Peace and Security Council. And therefore, the early warning systems and the interventions took a back seat. And therefore, now you see these conflicts in different parts of the continent continuing. And some of them, you know, in the Sahel region and West Africa, you have another challenge here in the southern region, that is the insurgents in Mozambique. And therefore, you can say the continent is found wanting. And that is why today they will be looking at these reforms and the impact the reforms had on the functioning of the different organs and agencies of the AU. And therefore, one can say, to really strengthen multilateralism, you really have to ensure that institutions that are supposed to defend, promote, and implement the key principle of multilateralism are strong.
That obviously leads to another important point that's going to be discussed this weekend. It's the issue of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, because all of these factors implement what the reforms are going to look like and how they're going to roll out. How would you weigh in on the back of that? Just in terms of where to from here, given the current stance?
Well, you know that due to COVID-19, because a decision was taken in 2018 to adopt the African Continental Free Trade Area, unfortunately, we know what happened since then. And therefore, it has been very difficult for the Secretariat in Accra, Ghana, and led by our own Wamkele Mene, to implement and to push countries to implement. Ratification, we did very well. 30 countries have ratified and also posted the instruments, but the implementation thereof, the issue of the war in Ukraine was also another challenge. And therefore, I think this time around, the leaders will have to come up with a way forward in terms of how are they going to ensure that you implement. But the reality is regions are inward looking, countries are inward looking, and the barriers, the trade barriers on the continent are still there. But others are saying, before the adoption of the African Continental Free Trade Area, countries on the African continent, in terms of percentage, doing business amongst themselves, it stood at 17%. Now we are at 30%. Of course, in 3 years, that is indeed a milestone. And perhaps if they can really look at this issue, come the next AU summit will be at 50.